You know, we made a decision, but it's not gonna be a happy one for some folks. But I think the tour was good. I think what direction we have moved in is to propose, recommend that Mike Ferrant and Peggy Delaney, we haven't talked about Sade, but would move up to the mezzanine. As you go into the mezzanine, right there on the left where that corner desk is, and then at one of those other desk areas, the corner where Mike Ferrant, where the corner desk is, as you walk into the mezzanine on the left would be a good setup for Mike. And then Peggy could be in that area as well. And one thing we talked about that not all of us heard about, where a few of us way in the back with Michael Chernick. There's another desk unit there way in the back, that may not be used. Move that up for Peggy.
And the paralegal concern, we do have that concern that Michael Grady.
Right, and the thinking was maybe some of those desks, Joe was sitting at some of those long table desks there. There's a lot of space in between where the chair is, and you move back. If we could bring those in a little closer, you put in another table or area in there and you would end up with the same number of desks. Is that right, Joe? You sat in there.
Michael, just so you're on, I know there's a difference between a paralegal and an intern, and I don't know how to arrange for the paralegal to have an appropriate workspace. But the idea is that that series of tables where the interns are spread out considerably. There's a lot more space between those tables. For instance, if I'm sitting at a chair and I'm leaning back, there must be close to 2.5 to 3 feet between me and the next table behind me. That's more space than any of our committee rooms have. And collapsing that series of tables down to a size where we can fit Peggy's table at the front of it up next to Mike, and having something large enough for the paralegal at the back seems to make a lot of sense. Nobody's going to be happy about this arrangement, but this onion is just not going to get peeled if we don't make some hard decisions. And that looked to me, and I think to all of us, to be the best way to utilize that space.
Well, I would offer that using the standard for your desks and how far you can lean back in committee as a standard for an office space is really not a professional standard anywhere. So I would not use that as a standard.
I can appreciate that, Michael, but every legislator has exactly the same problem that those interns are going to be looking at. And if the interns have more space than the legislators do, we have a problem.
There's no one standing behind them.
So I know Ruth has her hand up. Hang on, Ruth. How much time do the interns spend, Michael, sitting at their desk working? Do they spend most of their day there, or are they moving around to different committees?
It depends on how many interns we have, how many days a week they come, and the workload that they have.
Do they share desk space?
They have in the past.
I'm just trying to understand this so that we all know this, everyone's going to be uncomfortable. Look, we're looking at this coming session on how we can get our legislature and everyone working together back in this building. And there's going to be changes that nobody likes for everybody. And the goal is it's just one year to get us back and get us through this COVID hurdle. That's the goal here. Ruth and then Janet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't go on the tour, so I can't speak directly to what you just saw, but I guess I just want to express my discomfort of having this type of discussion in this level of detail publicly in the weeds about where individual staff members will sit. And then it just makes me very uncomfortable. And I don't think it's fair to those individual staff members to be having this discussion like in this great of detail. And I'm not sure that this is our job to determine where each individual person should sit. And I also feel uncomfortable that Mike is not here, and his recommendations clearly recommend a specific avenue, and he's been super flexible the whole time and willing to consider lots and lots of options. And so I feel uncomfortable about making a recommendation for his staff when he's not here. So I just can't support this recommendation or this sort of sub process that's just going on. It makes me really uncomfortable.
Janet, did you have something?
I was going to ask Michael Grady, do you know when there would be a decision of how many interns there were going to be? Would that be helpful to the committee?
Oh, we normally do the hiring for interns in the fall as part of the program with VLS. So we won't know for sure until then. For some reason, I'm losing power.
So I want to remind the committee here, we're making recommendations. These recommendations will be made to both the Legislative Management Committee and Joint Rules. So there's a lot of more moving pieces. We're not making final decisions. We're looking at all the options and we're making recommendations. And we're doing the legwork on this whole issue to help our colleagues make a decision. So I think it is appropriate for us to ask a lot of questions and view a lot of different alternatives, because we're doing the legwork. And we have to really, when we make a recommendation, we have to really know what we're thinking and have backup for that in terms of why that recommendation is there. The other folks may not agree with it. Management Committee may not agree with this. Joint Rules may not agree with it. There may be new issues that rise up to the surface in a month that we're not aware of. We're doing the best we can. We're trying to get everybody in the building. It's for January for this next session, and it's only for this next session, because we got bigger discussions to do about bigger space long-term. Janet, and then Butch.
And I was just going to respond that the reason we're having the discussion is that we have a memo with recommendation in it that we were asked to take a position on, and we could not take a position at all on it. My only comment was that I can't support it. So the reason we're having the discussion is because it's here on the table.
I'm gonna bump Butch for John, because I know John has to leave around 5 o'clock.
No, and I was just going to also add this, the details of this, we have to get into the details because this was very specific. And I think both rooms 32 and 33, which are proposed in this memo, are prime real estate for a legislative lounge space. I don't know where else we're going to put that. Accessible for everyone.
Butch?
Thanks. I took a little walk to Joasia while you folks were contemplating and thinking of the cafeteria. And I heard somebody mention earlier, well, let's put them down in the card room. And comment was made that that's not very private. And I agree with that. So I asked Joe to come with me up to the cafeteria. We looked at the raised area in the cafeteria again. Modifications on a temporary basis, and it
That's
really
in the back.
in the back, right? Yeah, because of the fire door and other issues that go there. So we also looked at the area in the hallway where quite often the lobbyists will gather.
By the cafeteria?
By the cafeteria,
On the right.
right opposite the vending machines, and
Oh, okay,
okay, and that doesn't have any airflow to it. That if you close that off, it would be
all right.
it would be not a good thing, I suppose. But we did kind of casually walking by where the Friends of the State House have their displays.
Mhm.
And I was wondering how about if we move the Friends of the State House down to the card room? And take that area, and Joe kind of scoped it out real quickly with me, and put up a petition and build an office there. It has airflow, it has lighting, it has sprinkler.
For Mike and Peggy, or
You talking where the gift card is?
where, yeah, where the couch is?
Yep.
We want to lay it out and make sure two fit in there, but
It's a space that we found that seems to meet the need without doing a lot of major infrastructure change. It could be very temporary.
Would Friends of the State House have much of a display this time around?
No, we're only having a cart.
Hmm.
We'll only have that cart in the session, so
And you would have that,
I can go anywheres.
and that's not that's only a couple of days, but that, yeah, the card room would work, because that's where sometimes we'd have the sale of the sweatshirts.
Just
Peggy, how does that scenario play out?
So you're talking about like when you walk in the cafeteria on the left,
Yeah, where that couch
top of the
is.
ramp on the left.
on the left? I mean, the only thing I would worry about is noise, that it was
It's very noisy
very noisy. That would be my only thing.
Yeah, for an hour or two a day.
and not very public.
Yeah.
No,
Very crowded.
you put up the walls, you put up some temporary walls. It's not gonna be open.
Is that floor to ceiling? Floor to ceiling walls?
Yeah, you put up some temporary walls. Block it off. That's why we have a contractor on our committee.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be centrally located. I like that idea, definitely.
this is not one of those decisions we need to make today.
No, but we could have we could give both recommendations to the management committee. Let them decide.
Well, we could go along with the first part, which is moving the two folks to Aiken,
Which we did.
and then say that we are split on what to do with the other two. That's the best way to put it, because I think it would be better to have Mike be part of the conversation at least. I mean,
Well, we're meeting next week,
right. I mean, I actually thought that the
probably at 10.
mezzanine seemed better once I saw it than I thought it would. But I'm still not convinced it's the best, because there's like a low ceiling. Mike would be behind that desk and all, but it's kind of low ceilinged in there, and I think it would feel claustrophobic after a while. And I think I'm just not sure it's the best. I mean, I'm not saying it's the worst, but I just feel like I'm in a quandary as to which one would be better. And so I'd rather sleep on it and think about it some more than make a decision that I'm not happy with. I know we're not deciding it, we're making a recommendation, but still.
So I know Alice has her hand up, but I want to ask Joe Waisha. So this scenario that you and Butch walked through,
Cooked up.
Amazing.
They cooked up.
for next week, can we really figure out if that's workable?
I think so, yes.
And then Peggy, Mike's coming back on
Yeah,
Monday.
Mike is back and I can join the Zoom, and I do think it's really important that Mike is part of the
Right,
conversation.
so that we could kind of bounce that one off of him as well. Keep the mezzanine in mind as well as that. And revisit it. So Allison?
Thank you, Alice. I was just thinking about what John had said about the legislative lounge. We still have 5 rooms that will be open. And I think that we will be able to accommodate both smaller meeting spaces and some possible dedicated lounge space with the 5 legislative committee spaces that are opening up. I mean, even though
I'll just remind folks about the legislative lounge and what I've heard from a couple House members, that the further away from the first floor that the lounge is, we talked about safety.
oh, right.
If folks are here late and they're up in the 40s, it's very
Yeah.
different than they're in the 30s. The other thing too that's going through my mind on the 30s, those 2 rooms are near the action of the well, the chamber. And quite often, there are situations where you need to quickly talk to some folks and go into a committee room. And those 2 rooms, I'd hate to give up one of them, because the activity of the legislature is more on that floor than it is up in the 40s.
Yeah, definitely.
And people, particularly folks with mobility issues, would then have to get in the elevator to go up to the 40s. So those two rooms in the 30s, if they're going to be opened up, it would be much more accessible to use those as a lounge and use those for rooms that people can scoot in to have some private conversations.
And Madam Chair, I just
The
had to
house.
buy. It's after 5 and sadly I've got to scoot. So
So
thank
we're going to
you.
meet next,
We'll see you
we're
next.
going to meet next, we've got to get our report done next week. So it's going to
Yep.
be a long meeting.
So
We could meet earlier than 1 o'clock. Because for the last 2 weeks, we've gone to at least 5:30.
but so if we started 12 and went for 5 hours, 12 to 5, is that what you're thinking?
I'd like to, I would prefer meeting at 10 o'clock, but I'm a house member. I'm used to working all day.
I know what she meant.
That is so unfair. And that's so unfair. We all work all day. We just work on 2 committees all day. Anyway, I await your decision, but I've sadly got to leave this fine company. Good luck with the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, because we have to go through our draft report. And could people make it at 10 next week or
I
not?
don't know. Let me check.
Okay.
Fortunately, yeah, my mother's thing is next week, so I won't be able to be there. But I'm.
I can work ahead of time. Are you able at 10? Are you tied up?
No, I'll be here.
I would suggest really meeting at 10, because,
Michael's still online because we need him. obviously.
yeah, is Michael still with us? Because, we got to get our report in order next week.
I'm not here next week.
That's
Ellen
right.
Tchaikovsky's covering for me.
Could you check to make sure she could make it at 10 next week?
I will send her an email. She's out on vacation right now.
Or Peggy, somebody. I mean, because we need to spend time with our report and loose ends.
So
Yeah,
we didn't talk about the IT space.
no, we didn't. Yes, well, we haven't talked about building capacity.
Right, but that's a short thing. That's really short. We can put that off.
Capacity.
We what?
I don't think building capacity is short.
Well, so the recommendation that we were going to make, it's okay to talk about that now.
Sure.
So I think we were talking about the capacity addressing should be done by the rules, the JLMC and the Sergeant at Arms combined. And that would be the
Not this
recommendation
committee.
to do.
Go to the council.
Do that,
Yeah.
set up this committee.
Yeah,
Our recommendation would be that they need to consider this way in.
right.
But this is not a recommendation that there be a building capacity. It's that the subject will be dealt with by those committees. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what I think.
Okay.
Too quick way to hand that on.
Oh, Chief Romeo is there. Chief, did you hear that?
You can go back to vacation.
Well, you know this. No, I think that's a very adequate statement, is that we, as long as someone deals with it. I think that there's definitely a building capacity, but I think there's a whole lot of other fine tuning things that we probably have to do that aren't going to be ready for next week.
Great. And then the legislative lounge, I think we've kind of fallen on that it's rooms 32 and 33.
And what about the ones up in the 40s could be used too,
Yeah,
right? I think so. They could have
That'd be
their
a matter of
own.
choice, but.
right.
Sure, the 40s people could use them.
Maybe we're further along than we think. So let's go through our draft report.
I have to go.
Michael, you're such a trooper there. Gotta go.
Okay, I'm just finishing emailing Ellen right now.
I don't want to wait till next week to go through our second draft of our draft.
Okay, does everyone have a copy of the draft in front of them?
We do.
Okay,
Do.
so I'm just gonna skip to the advisory committee recommendations in subdivision E on page 8, because that's really where the substance is changing. The changes were highlighted. The first in subdivision E2, you may remember last week, there was discussion of whether or not the committee had fully agreed on whether or not proof of vaccination was not required and what requirement, if any, there would be for masks. You confirmed that you were not going to require proof of vaccination for entry into the State House, but that the Joint Legislative Management Committee and the relevant Rules Committee should assess whether masks or other personal health measures should be required depending on state health orders and CDC guidance issues between the submission of the report and the convening of the 2022 session. Do you have
So we added
anything?
that.
Yep.
We added that at the end of our meeting last week.
Did I move on?
Yes, yes.
So
Well,
then
hang
there,
on, Michael. Hang on, Mike.
So the whole discussion that we had earlier today about trying to encourage consistent rules between the two chambers, doesn't that fit into this section here?
Mhm.
I think
yep.
it may need to go other places as well, but it seems like it also needs to be in here.
I will add that. So it's consistent rules, not only between the House and the Senate, but between House, Senate, and joint rules, correct?
Right, we had the whole discussion about shared space and
Right.
House and Senate space
And each chamber creating, right?
right,
Right, and
but they'd be the same.
we also mentioned vaccines in that too. This morning,
I think
or was it just mass? I
I
had
think it's
mass,
mass.
just mass.
it was mass.
Well, we mentioned a whole lot of hypotheticals.
We mentioned a lot of hypotheticals, but, right.
Should I move on? Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna move. All right. So in subdivision E3, there was the discussion of the use of alternative spaces. One of the first things that you had recommended last week is that you wanted to recommend that 133 State Street not be used for standing committees, caucuses, or public hearings. And that the use of the well of the House and the Senate chambers was recommended as potential meeting space for joint standing committees and certain non-standing committee meetings, subject to approval by the Senate or House Committee on Rules.
So we have really not vetted what we're doing with 109. And we have not vetted what those rooms in 109 would be used for. If they're used for overflow, we have not vetted what that means. We've really got to vet that out next week. That's on our agenda for next week. Because that will play in here. We've made sort of the decision about 133, but we're silent on 109. And I think we need to weigh in on that. That makes sense to folks. I think too, when we talk about, I'm thinking one thing that is going to come up, I think, is people asking, can we put air purifier systems? Those little machines in each of our committee rooms. We haven't addressed that, but I think there's some issues with that. I think one thing, they're really noisy.
Right. I do have a little bit of a brief paragraph if you want to hear it about those.
Yeah, we haven't touched base on that, and I don't want to lose that. I don't know if this is the appropriate when we're talking about committee meetings and space, that kind of brought it up. Do we want to wait on that for next week?
We're missing people.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're
I'll
tired.
bring that up next week.
I'll have, Matt will be filling in for me and then he can text me, so.
Okay. Sorry, Michael.
Okay. Well, in sub 4, there's a placeholder because today you are going to discuss similar recommendations as the use of the card room for the cafeteria, the Cedar Creek room, and school trips. You had a preliminary discussion about the school trips, but I don't believe you ever actually made a formal motion. There was a general discussion that school trips be limited in number of students per day on those school tours during the 2022 lead session, but I don't recall you ever actually making a motion on that.
You're right. We were going to wait until we did our draft, going through the draft. Do folks
Okay.
want to do that now? I mean, we do have a quorum. Or not?
I don't think there was any disagreement. Why don't we wait till everyone's here?
Yep.
I'll put it in the report.
Yeah.
Take a vote.
Sure.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we recommend that we limit the number of,
So what we were gonna do is we were gonna support their decision to limit the school trips. We weren't recommending
right,
that we do it.
somebody make a motion.
Well, I think my head isn't clear enough to make a motion. It's
My
complicated.
recollection
Wait.
was they thought they could accommodate 25 students in the morning, 25 in the afternoon, 50 total per day. There was no recommendation regarding chaperones. But if they made sure there were 25 students in the afternoon, they could deal with that entire issue.
So it was a long time ago, but the two women who were sitting here said they think they can do it on their own. And then we said, well, it'd be nice if we said something supportive. So we weren't going to actually take action on it. We were just going to encourage them to.
I think we were gonna take some action. We
I
were
felt like
gonna
we
put
were
it
gonna take some
in, we
action to
wanted to
give
put it
them
in the
the
report.
feeling they
Yeah.
had
The
leverage.
action is voice support for the recommendations.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, to support their, so however we want to do this, we want to reflect it in our report that we support a limitation on school groups and that we want to be specific about the numbers.
Well, do you just want to encourage JLMC and the rules committees to support limitations on students as implemented by the school tours program?
Yes,
Provided
Yes.
that such limitations are implemented to protect public health, it's that's something qualifying there.
I think their concern was that it wasn't all on their shoulders when
Right.
people questioned them. So if we put it in the report, it would have a little more teeth for
Yeah, we
them.
need it in the report, but do we want to we want to limit
I
the
think we
number of school trips and the number of students in each trip.
should- 2 per day, 25
Two
per
trips,
group.
2 trips per day, 25 per group.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is what we recommend.
Yes,
So let's put that in the report. I know we haven't taken a vote. But at
Okay,
least
I'll
put
put
it-
it in as a placeholder.
Yeah, and highlight it so that we can revisit it next week.
There ought to also be a provision in there that the sergeant at arms be directed to notify all school systems. I don't know how this works, but all school systems should be notified that tours are only conducted pursuant to a scheduled event so that nobody can just pop in here with a bus full of kids and expect to come in. Otherwise, you may have that problem of ad hoc.
So Joe, is that in response to their thought that when, all of a sudden legislators are inviting teams in for reading of resolutions and those type of things, and
Yeah,
Angelica this morning was pretty concerned about that.
this is a House issue because the Senate does not do such thing, but I think it's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And maybe the members of the House ought to be instructed that this is just not the year to do it.
So we could,
Or limit the group, if they can fit into the
how
25.
about just, if you're gonna, I don't know how to say it, but if you're gonna invite somebody here, you got to clear it with a sergeant at arms. And then if you've already got 2 school crews that day,
Doesn't work, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, it ought to be in our recommendation.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so
Noodle out.
all school
Can you-
systems and all legislators need to be informed that when school or school groups are visiting, that visit must be approved according to the 2-trip 25 student limits.
For recognition of sports teams.
there you go.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, it may not just be school groups.
It could be
Yep.
recognition of UVM basketball team or Milton High School or Virgins High School or
Okay.
Pittsford High School,
Yeah,
which there isn't one.
now we'd have to dig that one up.
Also, we did talk a little bit about recommendations for cafeterias, Cedar Creek. We're talking about receptions in that arena, which we haven't dealt with. So we need to keep that highlighted. And we also did talk about caucuses and that the chamber of the House to be used. I don't know how to phrase the Senate chamber with the appropriate.
Well, that's up in sub E3,
Okay.
where use of the well of the House of Representatives or the Senate chambers was also recommended as potential meeting space for joint committee meetings. You had a revision on that. You wanted that to be the well and the chambers would be used for set scheduled caucus meetings,
Right.
but that then for the impromptu or unscheduled caucus, that those caucuses might need to be accommodated in room 11. What rooms? Hold on. You had room 11,
Cafeteria.
cafeteria, and there was one more.
Was it the lounge, room 24?
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah, room 11, lounge, in the cafeteria. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong page of my notes. So I will revise that in sub 3.
Yeah, well, Cedar Creek room is really the reception. Those are the Cedar Creek room and the use of the cafeteria. We'd like to limit receptions one at a time. If we can, and we would prefer they be held in the cafeteria.
Right.
That's what we talked about.
Right.
So maybe indicate something to that effect, Michael,
Okay.
for the receptions.
Does that include the breakfasts? So we could do one breakfast in the morning and then still do
Do a
a reception in the afternoon? That would give,
That will give,
We'll give Joe coffee in the morning.
that would give Joe, yeah, I forgot about that.
we can do that.
So can I just clarify? So Cedar Creek should not be used for receptions in the 2022 legislative session. That receptions should be held in the cafeteria, and they should be limited to 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Is that what I just heard?
That works.
Yes.
Language, yep.
Okay.
You got your coffee back.
Okay, sure.
And your shrimp.
Yeah, okay.
Jeez.
Oh, I stopped eating.
And your ice cream.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And would you put any numbers on that, or is that just going to be whatever the cafeteria is going to accommodate?
Well, that's something we haven't addressed.
Okay.
We're going to try,
Flag that.
but yeah.
Okay. The the next change is in subdivision E5. This was something that the committee requested toward the end of the last meeting about how key questions that joint legislative management or rules need to address are whether and how floor proceedings should be live streamed or recorded, whether YouTube is the best tool for use of live streaming or recording, and how long recordings of floor proceedings and committee hearings should be retained for on the internet or alternatively in State Archives Record Center.
That has to be, right?
It's gotta
We-
be. I mean,
Yeah,
this is fine.
right.
This is-
Okay.
I don't think it's a question anymore,
No, I
right?
think you need it.
Yeah.
It's a recommend that they need to look at it.
All right. So I will move down then to page 10, subdivision 6. There was the recommendation that room 26, the Senate Committee on Ag, should not be used for a legislative standing committee, and that the Senate Committee on Agriculture should meet in room 13, the pro tem's office, and then the Senate pro tem would use room 26 as an office. I want to be clear. I did not hear from the recommendation whether or not this is just limited to the 2022 legislative session. So I did not include that caveat in this recommendation. I just wanted to put that on the table for you to decide whether or not it should be there or not.
I don't know.
How about if we say until further addressed by the Senate Rules Committee?
Okay.
Actually, for the 2022 session, until further advised or recommended by the Rules Committee.
Okay. Will do. So because you moved the room 26 recommendation to its own recommendation on sub 6, sub 7 no longer includes the reference to the 6 existing rooms, including the Senate Ag room. So that just remains those current House committee rooms, which then leads into subdivision 8. And this is because the House committee are moving. You wanted to be clear that it was the House standing committees were moving and that the House rules committees should be the ones that recommends the use of those committees going forward, because the current Senate standing committee rooms are not large enough to accommodate any of the existing House committees. Senator Benning has already requested an edit here in the second to last sentence of sub 8, where it says, as the largest committee, Senate committee is smaller than almost every House committee. He wants almost struck, as he made the point that they are smaller than every House committee. Should I move on?
Yes, yes.
All right, so the next change is in sub 10, that this is going to be changed because based on what you just discussed today about how the legislative operations staff currently located on the first floor of the State House Annex should be moved to rooms 32 and 33 of the third floor of the State House to allow for provision of services to legislators in a convenient space. So this is just not an accurate recommendation anymore. From my understanding, you recommended that Charlene and Mariah, as part of legislative operations, be moved to 2 Aiken, at least temporarily. And that currently the recommendation is for Mike Ferrant and Peggy to be moved to the second floor of the mezzanine to occupy the 2 current wooden carousel spaces.
So that's been changed a little bit, Michael.
Okay.
Yes, Charlene and Mariah, 2 Aiken, yes. Another option for Mike, Parent, and Peggy was the space up by the cafeteria.
Oh, that's right.
Where-
I'm sorry.
And then we're having BGS come back a little bit more next week to talk about that. So we'll maybe just highlight mezzanine or by the cafeteria,
Okay.
just so we don't, we'll know more next week.
Okay. And then moving down to sub 11. Last week, Arlene said that she'd be willing to have a human resources staff move to the office space previously used by David Sheets on the first floor of 2 Aiken. Renovations such as painting, new carpet, new lighting, and new secure unlockable doors were requested.
We may need to wordsmith this a little bit. I think we just need to flag it and wordsmith this. We're not sure. There may be more discussions going on here in terms of what needs to be done. And we need to visit this more next week.
Okay. I will leave that highlighted then,
Yes,
or bracketed, so you know that you want to come back to it.
right.
And then in sub 12, you want to recommend that legislative leadership and BGS should initiate planning, construction, and installation of a new HVAC system for the State House as soon as practicable. The advisory committee reviewed application of air standards to the current State House heating and cooling system, most specifically application of ASHRAE 62.1. The standard could not be required, was not feasible for implementation. However, updating HVAC as soon as practical so that the State House can meet ASHRAE standards will improve air quality and help improve the overall public health environment within the building. And then, you haven't really talked about what your overall conclusion is. And it can be very brief. It could be very
We
detailed.
did the best we could.
Yeah.
Janet developed an ulcer.
No.
So I can give you some language to look at next week on that.
Okay, that works. We're fading really fast here.
I will work
Anything
on that.
else?
I will work on that tomorrow and try to get draft language out to whomever on the committee wants to see it before it goes to
I'd send it
the proofer.
Yeah, send it to all the members would be helpful at this
Okay.
point.
Okay.
And then Peggy and I guess we'll work on an agenda. But I just don't want to get in a bind next week of working till 6 o'clock at night. I would really recommend if we can meet at 10 this week. That work for folks Tuesday? Huh?
10 to 6, we ought to be able to.
I'm just afraid to do the 1 to 5 and we're gonna be in a bind again, and I just don't want that. So let's plan on 10 o'clock next Tuesday, we'll get a notice out, Peggy, we should get a notice out to the members.
10 o'clock, is that it?
Yeah, and-
What date is
yeah,
that?
let's do 10 to 3.
What date is that? The 9th?
Well, which I have, it's Tuesday, the 10th.
Cafeteria will be open.
Oh, thank God, so we'll
We'll
have lunch,
coffee.
can we have lunch?
Yes, you can.
Oh, that would be
But you
terrific.
have to work while you're eating your lunch.
Yes,
I'm not gonna be here, but you have to eat.
Want me to go?
No, you can't.
You can sit in the cafeteria and eat, right?
You want to go offline?